The family that vacations together stays together. At least, that was the plan. Except now, the dastardly desk clerk is saying he can't confirm your connecting rooms.
Wait, what?
That's right, ma'am. You have rooms 201 and 709.
No, we cannot be 5 floors away from our kids.
The doors have double locks. They'll be fine.
When you want connecting rooms confirmed before you arrive, it matters where you stay.
Welcome to Hilton. I see your connecting rooms are already confirmed.
Hilton, for the stay.
Welcome back to Fine Tooning with Drew Taylor, your one-stop shop when it comes to animation news and commentary. I am entertainment writer Jim Hill, and Mr. Taylor, whose readings on the industry you can regularly read over on The Wrap, and whose musings on the Mission Impossible movies you can still listen to on Light the Fuse, the official Mission Impossible podcast. Drew and I are recording this week's show on Sunday, October 19th, and yesterday, Drew was at Animation is Film. This is that event we were talking about on last week's episode. And Drew, you wound up moderating 2 panels or leading 2 Q&As on films that were screened yesterday?
Yeah, absolutely. I did ChaO in the morning from G Kids, which is lovely. And then I did Arco, which is coming out from Neon later that night. So I went home. I took the train back. There was a thing at the Hollywood Bowl, Jim. You know that traffic for the Hollywood Bowl is just too insane.
Yeah.
So I got on the subway, came back, and yeah.
Okay. Now, ChaO, as you mentioned, this is described as a wild romantic comedy from Japanese animation production house. Am I saying this name right? Studio 4 Degrees Celsius. Is that how I'm supposed to interpret that?
That's how I say it. I don't know if we're right, but yeah, that's how I would say it. Sure.
Okay, and ChaO's story set in a futuristic world where humans and mermaids coexist, and so we get to meet Stefan, a mild-mannered office worker who's employed by a shipbuilding company, who I don't need you to go into how he gets proposed to by a mermaid princess, but he gets proposed to, and hilarity ensues. So
yes.
Okay, so you saw this, Drew, and led the Q&A, the panel. Were any of the filmmakers there? Or?
Yeah, the character designer, who was also the head of animation, was there, and he was lovely. And it was so funny because his interpreter was like, "Oh, we've worked together before," because I do so many of these things for Japanese animated movies. But he was lovely, and I can't tell you how much I love this movie, Jim. It is so special. The animation is beautiful. The story is really funny. You kind of. It takes place in a kind of a futuristic world where they're coexisting, and then the movie is largely a flashback to their relationship and how the human world and the mermaid world kind of commingled for the first time.
Wow.
So
okay.
I think you will love it. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Now, Arco, on the other hand, this is an animated science fiction fantasy film. Written and directed by Hugo Benvenu. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, and but also produced by Natalie Portman. Really, like the Natalie Portman?
Yeah, and she's a voice in the movie too, in the English dub, which is crazy. The cast is insane.
No. In fact, I brought that up in the reference today because when you look at who's doing the English dub of this thing, Will Ferrell, Mark Ruffalo, Andy Samberg, America Ferrera, Flea.
Yes,
but at the same time, quite the story. What is it? A 10-year-old Arco who lives in the year 2932, accidentally time travels by rainbow to the year 2075, where he meets Iris. And so even for time traveling, it's a little bit in our future. I mean,
yes, it's that same old story, Jim. Time traveling on a rainbow. We've seen it a million times before.
Speaking of
it's good.
Having seen this, so all right, this debuts at Cannes back in May. Now it's not even been released in France yet. That doesn't happen till later on this week, Wednesday.
Oh, okay.
Wednesday, October 22nd. Whereas I think you mentioned again that Neon is putting out in American theaters on November 14th. So who was there? Who did you get the interview from Arco?
So I interviewed the writer-director, who is a lovely French guy, and the movie is really special, and it's sort of Neon's Oscar movie for animation. If we'll recall, they had Robot Dreams a couple of years ago, which I know we both loved Robot Dreams. So this is their their best animated feature hopeful for 2025, and it's really special. It's really unique. It's very kind of melancholic, and the animation is beautiful, done by one animation studio, which was incredible. And if you want to see something really strange and affecting, this is the movie for you. I didn't like it quite as much as ChaO, but I loved them both, and it was a real thrill to get to talk to both filmmakers.
Cool. Now, you also got to see yesterday All You Need Is Kill. Now, this, by the way, is also from Studio 4 Degrees Celsius.
Yes.
Now, did you get to see it at Annecy earlier this year?
I saw it at Annecy. Yeah. But it's finally coming out. I think G Kids is putting it out soon. I think in January maybe, but they'll have a Oscar qualifying run. So but Jim, this has a special place in my heart because it's the same story that Edge of Tomorrow is based on.
The Tom Cruise movie from 2014. Based on the Hiroshi Sakarazaka novel, and I mean, that story, that time loop story done in animation, this must be amazing.
It's amazing. It's really, really special. And the creature design is amazing. The character design, the robots, everything about it is just like, I loved it when I saw it at Annecy. I thought it was really, really cool and moving and everything else. And so I'm very excited that's finally coming out too. And everybody seemed to love all the movies. They were packed houses. There was the Paranorman screening was last night as well, and there was a Chainsaw Man screening. So the energy was good, Jim, at Animation is Film. People were feeling it. And just great. They had the Zootopia 2 panel was yesterday too, so it was good. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Again, sounds like a very full day at this year's Animation is Film, which, by the way, was staged at the TCL Chinese Theater 6 in Hollywood. And I'm thinking I really need to get out to LA next year to attend this in person. But
you do.
Anyway, folks, we have more animation-related news in a moment, but first here, we need to acknowledge our sponsor, which, of course, is UnlockMagic.com, where you can get real discounts on Walt Disney World and Universal Orlando tickets, sometimes upwards of 12% off. And just so you know, Unlock Magic is run by the exact same team behind DVC Rental Store and the DVC resale market. So just pick your dates, grab your tickets for things like after-hour hard tickets like Mickey's Very Merry, which, by the way, according to Mr. Testa, the first 3 of those are now sold out for this year. Likewise, Jollywood Nights, which starts up 2 weeks from now, November 18th. But head on over to unlockmagic.com and save. And when you buy the tickets, let them know that Drew and Jim sent you. But all right. Anyway, now to pivot to this past weekend's domestic box office. Black Phone 2, which was the sequel to that Blumhouse film, which arrived in theaters back in June of 2022. Did 26.5 in ticket sales in North America, which is 10% better than the first Black Phone did over its opening weekend. It was 23.6 back then. But then again, look, this is a horror mystery thriller in theaters 2 weeks before Halloween, which you have to admit is a smart bit of scheduling on Universal's part. Will probably play strong through early November.
Especially because the grabber, Jim, he's part of the Halloween Horror Nights Blumhouse Terror Tram.
This is true. This is true. And another reason why I am so happy I'm out here in the woods of New Hampshire, because it's like, that thing looks terrifying. On the other hand, not great news for TRON Ares as it entered into its second weekend in domestic release. Ticket sales in North America fell off by 67%. They only sold $11 million in change. And as we've previously mentioned on this podcast, anything above a 60% drop-off in domestic ticket sales, 62, 65, 67, you get the idea, is considered bad news by studio execs. Now, mind you, worldwide, TRON Ares just blew past 100 million in global ticket sales, but not what Disney wanted for this Jared Leto movie, right?
Well, the conventional wisdom is that it has to make 3 times its budget to break even, and we've heard that the budget could have been upwards of 200 million. So it does not look like it's going to crack 600 million. Nope. But if they're selling those identity discs at $80 a pop at the Magic Kingdom, maybe, maybe we can recoup something there.
There we go. There are always other revenue streams. That said, pressure is now on for Zootopia 2 and Avatar Fire and Ash to deliver big for the mouse to sort of...
And Predator.
I really hope that works. I love the trailer.
Yeah, it looks really cool and fun. I'm so excited about it.
Okay.
I cannot wait.
Yeah, that might wind up being the sleeper here. That, really hoping that comes through. Now, speaking of animation-related stuff, Gabby's Dollhouse, the movie, now starting its 4th week in North American theaters. Number 7 at the domestic box office. 1.6 million in ticket sales. They're within an inches of 30 million total so far in North America. But speaking of Gabby's Dollhouse, Drew, did you see the Universal Destinations and Experiences announced just this past week the lands that are going to be built at Universal Kids? That's that theme park they're building now in Bliss, Texas. And you grew up in San Antonio, right?
I did grow up in San Antonio.
Okay,
so I'm very excited about this.
Yeah. Now, where is Bliss in relation to San Antonio? I mean,
I believe Bliss is more in the Dallas, Fort Worth metroplex area. So, I'm excited. I saw that they announced the lands, but I didn't see what they were. So tell us, Jim, what are the lands?
Well, what's interesting about this, and again, park open, under construction now, opens in 2026, but when you enter Universal Kids, you go through an area called the Isle of Curiosity, which is Gabby's Dollhouse themed. And when you think about it, when Universal believes strongly enough in this particular franchise, that it's a key component of the entrance experience. And again, remember, this is a different theme park for Universal. This is it's aimed specifically at families with very small kids. It's kind of Universal's answer to Legoland, and the IPs, Drew. I mean, what are fascinating about the IPs? Again, all animated. What is it? Shrek, Puss in Boots, Trolls, Jurassic Park, Chaos Theory, the Minions. But the one thing that is not Universal owned outright is SpongeBob. They license from Paramount, Paramount, Viacom, Skydance, whatever we're calling it this week. Soon to be Warner's. That was the one they went outside for. That's how much they believe in SpongeBob. And speaking of franchises that major media companies really believe are stronger than you might think, the sing-along version of K-pop Demon Hunters is headed back into theaters just ahead of Halloween. And to be specific here, folks, this animated fantasy adventure is going to be playing in all 3 of the major U.S. theatrical chains, AMC, Cinemark, and Regal, but very limited run from October 31st through November 2nd. And by the way, since the sing-along version of K-pop Demon Hunters are returning to theaters on Halloween night, costumes are encouraged at least for that night. Now, Drew, you wanted to point out that what's kind of significant about this is, well, especially K-pop Demon Hunters going into AMC, this potentially, signals something bigger.
Yeah. Well, yeah. if you've been following on social media, Guillermo del Toro, who is, who we love on the show, has been talking about how Frankenstein is going into even more theaters. Apparently it was in like 10 theaters this weekend. Every show was sold out, obviously. There was merchandise, there were giveaways. And so he said that the presence of the movie will increase this week to many more theaters, which obviously makes sense, Jim, in the week before Halloween to put
absolutely.
Frankenstein into theaters.
Yeah.
It's like, hello. And the movie is a total masterpiece. So, I mean, I encourage everybody to go see it. But this seems to be a turning point where AMC and Netflix are going to more closely align for these kind of theatrical events. The thing that I saw, too, that I thought was interesting was that they asked the Duffer Brothers, I think it was Variety, if they would put the finale in theaters because it is over 2 hours long. And they said no, which I thought was interesting because I feel like if Taylor Swift can basically make $30 million off of a music video, then, I mean, what is the demand for a Stranger Things series finale event in the theater? I mean, come on. This is a no-brainer, Jim. Come on.
No, I agree, but and maybe could it be that the Duffers, Duffer Brothers, after all this time and all of us sitting patiently watching this at home, the notion of and you got to go to the theaters to see the finale. That's like
right.
Let's have a little more respect for the audience. Not to say that they couldn't say a week or two after it's on Netflix, put it out in the theaters, no, I like that idea.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, folks, that's the theatrical side of this week's animation news. But when we get back from this break, Drew and I will discuss the television animated side of things. But first, this.
Big news. Sephora is now on Uber Eats. So if you find yourself facing a beauty emergency, like needing a last-minute gift, or you're just out of your favorite mascara, again, don't panic. We got you. Order now and get $10 off on Sephora orders of $50 or more on the Uber Eats app. Order now. Offer ends October 30th. One order per customer. Additional terms apply. See app for availability. Delivery fees may apply.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Purina believes no one should have to make the impossible choice between their own safety and their pets. But nearly half of domestic abuse survivors delay leaving because they can't bring their pets with them. Through the Purple Leash Project, Purina is helping create more pet-friendly domestic violence shelters so survivors and their pets can escape and heal together. Visit Purina.com/purple to learn more.
And we're back. Did I say, just when we went to commercial, that Drew and I were done discussing the theatrical released animation on this week's show? If so, I lied. That's because if you're a Hayao Miyazaki fan, tonight and tomorrow, you have a chance to see that Academy Award-winning film, Spirited Away, back up on the big screen. And this is thanks to the nice folks at Fathom Entertainment and G-Kids. Now, tonight, the day this podcast goes live, Tuesday, October 21st, they're going to be screening the Japanese language version of Spirited Away. This is the one with English subtitles, whereas if you prefer the English language dub of Spirited Away, Fathom Entertainment and G-Kids will be presenting that version of this Hayao Miyazaki film in a theater near you tomorrow night. And again, Wednesday, October 22nd. Looking off to the future now, which is somewhat appropriate given that the old Hanna-Barbera animated film that served as the inspiration for this supposedly upcoming film is set in the future. Did you see this story in the trades about how Jim Carrey is supposed to be starring in a live-action version of the Jetsons?
Yes, that was It was broken by a little website called The Wrap, Jim, by one of my colleagues.
There we go.
And I will say that it's not the only animated project that Colin Trevorrow is working on at Warner Brothers.
Really?
I don't think I can say anything else.
Okay, that's interesting.
But I mean, you and I both know that they have tried to make a live action Jetsons since 84, maybe? I mean, the animated movie came out after they had announced the live action one.
Yeah, and in fact, here at the house, and again, to give you how long they have been trying to get a Jetsons movie up off the ground. I've got a copy of the screenplay that was written back when Chevy Chase was supposed to play George Jetson. And I bring that up because there's a scene in this screenplay, Drew, where those condos, futuristic condos high in the sky over planet Earth where the Jetsons supposedly live. This film actually features a scene where the Jetsons, for the first time ever, are actually down on the surface of planet Earth, and they're terrified. They've never been here before, and that they're sort of in this cloud of mist and fog, and they hear something coming at them, and hopping at them out of the fog is a bunny rabbit, and it terrifies George, Elroy, and daughter Judy. But again, that was over 25 years ago.
Who is the producer on that one? Do you remember?
I remember. I know that Rob Minkoff was supposed to direct this.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And mind you, this was on the heels of Stuart Little. So it was the notion of, he's hot, let's get him. But and by the way, in that same window of time, and since we're talking about Jim Carrey, I want to say it was 98 when the news broke about how he was going to reunite with writer-director Steve Odenkirk. They previously worked on the Ace Ventura movies together on that remake of The Incredible Mr. Limpet, the Don Knotts thing from 64.
Yep. I remember that too.
Have you ever seen the animation test for this thing?
Yeah, it's absolutely horrifying. It should not have. And then didn't Richard Linklater flirt with it years later?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would have been more interesting, but yeah, it's another doomed project.
Well, I mean, and the weird part of it is it's the same thing. I mean, by the way, this Jetson film, again, being done at Warner Brothers, and Limpet was supposed to be done, at Warner's, but the thinking was that because they were paying Carrey an outrageous amount to be in the film, this remake, I want to say it was $25 million, they wanted his face on the fish. Yeah. And that's the thing. Seriously, folks, just go Google Jim Carrey, Mr. Limpet, test footage, and you'll see, why Drew and I made those noises. It is genuinely horrifying. So, now, speaking of things from the early 2000s, this actually is closer to the 1990s, which is a decade that Mr. Taylor is supposedly working on a book about, at Disney.
Yes, slowly.
I'm wondering, as part of that book, will you be touching on Marsupilami? Do you remember this character?
Jim, I could sing you the theme song right now. Marsupilami coming running through the jungle. Yeah, I remember it very well. That was it was kind of in the tail end of the Disney afternoon renaissance.
It was.
And based on a Belgian comic book, right?
See, he knows his stuff, folks. Okay, yes. Marsupilami was actually a character created back in 1952 by cartoonist Andre Farkin. And what's the interesting bent on this story, Drew, is because Spielberg and Disney at this point were already brawling about who had control over Roger Rabbit. Disney was now looking for another zany cartoon character that they could control outright. So they licensed Marsupilami in 1991. The character makes its first appearance in a Disney-produced project in 1992. And again, I'm going to test Drew's knowledge here. You remember Raw Tunage, right? The Disney attempted, an animated Saturday Night Live?
And wasn't that where Bonkers got his first break? It was in Raw Tunage as well? Or was Bonkers on his own?
That's interesting. I think you're right. Didn't they do a Bonkers short to sort of set up the show?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Which was the most nakedly kind of like, we don't need Roger Rabbit to have Roger Rabbit. It's like, yeah. But anyway.
All right. So anyway, Marsupilami the following year gets his own standalone animated series, 13 episodes. There was also Plush. Disney Publishing got behind the show as well. The parks actually had a Marsupilami walk-around character for a while, and but it only runs from September through December of 93, and America just does not embrace this character, and Disney eventually lets its rights lapse to this Andre Farkin character. And I bring this up because Nickelodeon is now looking to see if they can succeed where Disney failed 30 years ago. Did you see the story about them acquiring?
No, he's back.
He's back. Well, not only he's back, they have acquired the international rights to the Marsupilami. Please notice the S, the plural. This is a new CG animated series that features 3 of these kooky, crazy characters that Andre Farkin again came up with in back in '52. Evidently, there's 52 episodes, Drew, made up of 11-minute long cartoons, and this will launch in 2026. And I have to say, there's a part of me that now wants to go over to eBay and see what sort of Disney era Marsupilami stuff I can find. Though, speaking of fun stuff from the past, can you tell us about what you found at a thrift store earlier this week?
Sure. So I walked into the American Cancer Society Discovery Shop in Toluca Lake, which was probably there, Jim, when you were still there. Were you working with John Candy on the news show? Is that what you were working on, or was it something different?
No, it was a project called Roadshow. And in fact, it's so funny you mentioned this. I have a copy of Paul Meyer's John Candy, A Life in Comedy. And, and it's one of these things where literally 5 minutes before Drew and I started here, I've been reading the book and I realized, I didn't check to see if the show I worked on is in this book. And I went back to the index and there is absolutely no
It has been, in the words of Doc Brown, Jim, it has been erased from existence.
Oh my God. Yeah. No mention at all of Roadshow. That shows you how important it was to John's career. So
there you go.
Fun.
Well, anyway, I walked in, 5 minutes before my Pilates class, and I found a thing from Superior Galleries, which I don't even know if that still exists, but it is the Warner Brothers and Disney animation art auction featuring the collection of Mel Blanc, the voice of animation. So this was held on November 5th, 1992 in Beverly Hills. And there's a ton of amazing Disney stuff and a ton of amazing stuff that was part of Mel's collection. And Jim, I'm looking at an original rough from Pinocchio that would have set you back a whopping $1,000. So
yeah,
if only we could go back, Jim, and make a few purchases. I think, an original Dino from Flintstones art from the children's books. 4 pieces, Jim. $1,200. $1,200. I mean, this is just like It's killing me. But it's amazing because I had no idea he had amassed all this stuff. But it's like, there's stuff like this, Jim, which is a get well card that the cartoonist did for him when he was in the hospital in 1961.
Yes,
you can see
famous the car accident where, I mean, Hanna-Barbera was horrified because it was like Mel was practically every character they were using at that point. And it was like, when we were pre-gaming earlier here, folks, Drew mentioned that, there were flyers for other auctions and other things inside of this auction catalog. And the reason I bring this up, my friend Justin Jorgensen, there was an estate sale when we lost John Hench. And Justin worked with John, so he wanted something to remember him by. And so he goes to the estate sale. And, he's in John's library and he pulls a book off the shelf that, he's always wanted for his own, reference library at home. And so, Justin is paging through it and a paper falls out of this book. And it's an early rough sketch of, how John was the designated artist to do the, every 5 years, every 10 years, the official portrait of Mickey Mouse.
Yeah, absolutely.
This was the rough sketch for, I want to say, the last one of them that John did. And it fell out of the book. And Justin looks down at it and immediately picks it up, stuffs it back into the book, and then brings it out to the cashier. How much for the book? Oh, it's $10. It's like, okay, thank you. And, proceeds to...
I would have slipped it into my back pocket and put the book back on the shelf, but,
you and I are less honorable than Justin, but but at the same time, that's the cool thing about these estate sales and the very thing you were mentioning. I mean, just a lifetime of stuff that has either been gifted or Mel himself collected. So, oh man, that catalog must be great.
Yes.
So
pretty cool.
All right. Now, speaking of Mr. Taylor, you and Pendleton Ward went to school together. That's right.
Yeah, we went to middle school together. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was doodling characters on my math homework that I would later see on Cartoon Network.
More to the point, we'd all see them on Cartoon Network because, of course, Pendleton Ward was the creator of Adventure Time. And that Emmy Award-winning series has actually gotten 2 spin-offs so far. Distant Lands, which debuted back in 2020, and Fiona and Cake, which premiered back in August of 2023. And just wanted to remind folks that the second season of Fiona and Cake will be dropping on Max later this week. In fact, on Thursday, October 23rd. And just so you know, all 10 episodes of season 2 will drop on a weekly basis on Max now through December 25th. And while we're talking up animated things on subscription streaming services, last week, Drew, we really should have mentioned that the animated version of Roald Dahl's The Twits debuted on Netflix last week on October 17th. And have you seen this Phil Johnson film?
Yes, I saw it a long, long time ago. Mm-hmm. It's very charming and very funny, and the animation is really unique and well done. And yeah, it's directed by Phil Johnston, who we know and love from his work with Disney Animation, on Wreck-It Ralph and Zootopia and all these things. And it's very much worth watching, and also worth watching just as part of the animation collection from Netflix. You'll recall that, 10 years ago, they bought the Roald Dahl company for $400 million and have not produced a lot of stuff from that deal. They did the Wes Anderson shorts, and now this is the second thing. So hopefully there's much, much more Roald Dahl stuff coming, and I know there is some stuff in the pipeline. So hopefully people watch this and get more excited about all the Roald Dahl stuff coming from Netflix animation soon.
Now, what's kind of intriguing about this is, speaking of Roald Dahl, did you see this thing with John Lithgow that's coming to Broadway this season, where he plays Roald Dahl? In fact, what's kind of interesting is that it's Roald Dahl by way of J.K. Rowling. It just sort of it depicts a day when this noted children's author finds himself in the hot seat because he's written something controversial. But this play called Giant actually played earlier this year in London's West End, and Lithgow's performance as Dahl was so acclaimed he took home an Olivier, which is the British equivalent of the Tonys, but the American version of Giant opens on Broadway this coming March 2026. And speaking of March, Mr. Taylor, very busy guy, so he's got to march out of here shortly. So, say goodbye to the nice people, Drew.
Goodbye, everyone.
Okay.
I'll see you next week.
Yeah, now, speaking of which, Drew will be back for next week's show, but after this break, it'll just be me for the remainder, where I'll then shine a spotlight on the 2 animated features that the Sherman Brothers worked on after their exclusive contract at Walt Disney Productions ended in 1968. But first, this.
The detective said missing kids usually come home. What happens when they don't?
Based on a true story.
Police looking for John Gacy.
We discovered bodies. By the looks of it, they're younger men.
The things he did to those kids. He's sick.
The system failed these families.
Devil in Disguise, John Wayne Gacy. Streaming now, only on Peacock.
Do you know how many there are?
Up to you to find out.
Wish you could become a morning person? You know the type, up before the sun, early morning runs, first one to the office with donuts and a smile. How do they do it? Easy. With the new Galaxy Watch 8, sleep tracking and personalized insights from Samsung Health help you improve so you can wake up to a whole new you. One who, dare I say it, skips the snooze? It's possible. Train your sleep with Galaxy Watch 8. Learn more at Samsung.com. Requires compatible Samsung Galaxy phone, Samsung Health app, and Samsung account.
Finished training for the day? Time to fight post-workout fatigue with Core Power Protein Shakes. They're packed with 26 grams of high-quality protein to build muscle and electrolytes to help hydrate. The nutrition you need to help your body replenish, rebuild, and repair post-workout so you can power on to the next one. Champion your recovery with Core Power. Visit corepower.com to learn more.
And we're back. Okay, so the modern Disney company, they regularly trumpet the fact that Richard M. and Robert B. Sherman wrote over 200 songs for some 27 films that were produced by this studio, which is why these two are genuine Disney legends and celebrated every chance the studio gets, which, I have to tell you, really wasn't the case back in the middle of 1968. As our feature story gets started today, the Sherman Brothers are packing up their office on the Disney lot. Not because they want to, but rather because Dick and Bob kind of feel like they have to. To explain, ever since Walt died in December of 1966, things just haven't been the same at the studio. Projects the Sherman Brothers had labored over for years, like their Mary Poppins follow-up, Bedknobs and Broomsticks, now aren't moving forward. Just a reminder, by the way, Disney Studios announced in April of 1966 that this project, which back then was called the Magic Bedpost, was now in active development, which meant that this visual effects-filled movie musical would likely go into production the following year, 1967, and then be released to theaters just in time for the holiday season, 1968. But as I mentioned a moment ago, Walt died in December of 66, and in the wake of his passing, a lot of projects at Disney Studio had previously been prepping for production in 1967 were suddenly placed on hold. And this was because the management team that Walt had left behind was, well, it was loaded with loyal lieutenants, people that Walt could turn to and then immediately count on getting a specific job done. But what Disney Studios was woefully short of back then anyway was real leaders. And as the executives there tried to figure out what a post-Walt version of Disney productions, how it would even work, things begin to stall out, which is genuinely frustrating for someone like longtime studio vet Bill Walsh, who was the producer of Mary Poppins, not to mention the guy behind other big Disney hits like That Darn Cat and The Love Bug. Which is why, as Walsh saw the Sherman Brothers growing more and more frustrated about what was going on at Disney Studios in 67 and 68. I mean, example, a lot of the songs that Dick and Bob wrote for Disney's next animated feature, The Aristocats, wound up on the cutting room floor, all because Wally Reitherman, who is now the main decision maker at Disney Animation, now that Walt was gone, well, he couldn't decide which characters in that feature film he actually wanted to sing songs. And so Walsh is trying to reassure the Sherman Brothers that Bedknobs and Broomsticks, in fact, in spite of the fact that the studio senior management has just placed this project on hold, is still going to get made. Bill has Dick and Bob during their last 6 months at Disney. Their official contract with the company would run out in the late spring, early summer of 1968. He had them working to get Bedknobs and Broomstick in the best possible shape prior to production. And Walsh would go on to say, I swear to God, guys, we are actually going to make this movie. You just got to have a little faith. I'll call you back to the studio just as soon as those bozos in the corner office officially greenlight this film. But as for Dick and Bob, at this point, they were actually kind of anxious, eager even, to put some distance between themselves and Disney. The most recent film for the studio that the Sherman Brothers had written a full set of songs for, the one and only Genuine Original Family Band, which Disney had released at theaters in March of 68, had just tanked at the box office. And then when you factor in what happened with The Happiest Millionaire the year previous, and, well, all right, in that case, Millionaire was the last film that Walt Disney personally produced. And some folks at the studio will tell you it turned out the way that it did because Walt was distracted when this movie was being shot. He was finalizing his plans for Project Florida, while still other folks will tell you that Millionaire is as flabby and as flat a film as it is because, well, Walt was just no longer on his A game while this film was in production. I mean, shortly he'd be headed across the street to St. Joseph's Hospital, where Walt's doctors would open him up and then learn that his body was riddled with cancer. So long story short, look, Happiest Millionaire is a lousy movie. It's long. It's boring. But if we're being honest here, this sort of thing happens in Hollywood all the time. Really talented people come together, work very hard, and still somehow produce a dud of a movie. And as far as the Sherman Brothers were concerned, they felt like they were getting a little too much of the blame for Happiest Millionaire underperforming at the box office when it was released to theaters in June of 67. And then when the one and only Genuine Original Family Band performs poorly 9 months later, when it's released in March of 68, the whispering began at Disney Studios that Dick and Bob had lost their touch. Now, what's kind of crazy about this is later that same year, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, the United Artists musical that the Sherman Brothers had written the score for, that would be released at theaters and then go on to be the 10th highest grossing film for all of 1968. But the problem here, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang wouldn't arrive in theaters till December of that same year, 68, and Dick and Bob, especially on the heels of their second recent film for Disney underperforming at the box office, again, just felt like, let's get some distance between ourselves and the mouse, at least for a while. So after buttoning up the score for Bedknobs and Broomsticks, the very last thing the Sherman Brothers did for that film was to take The Beautiful Bryony, which is a song that Dick and Bob had originally written for Mary Poppins, that Walt had eventually cut out of that picture, and then rework that song so The Beautiful Bryony would then fit in logically with Bedknobs and Broomsticks storyline. But Once that's done, Shermans pack up their office at Disney and then drive off the lot in Burbank. Now, the irony here is, while there are, at this moment in time, executives on the Disney lot who aren't all that enthusiastic when it comes to working on a new project with Dick and Bob, elsewhere in Hollywood, when people learn that the Sherman Brothers are no longer exclusively in the employ of Walt Disney Productions, that the guys who won 2 Academy Awards for the song and the score of Mary Poppins are now available for hire, these other studio heads quickly beat a path to Dick and Bob's door. And among the first to reach out was Bill Melendez. Bill was a former assistant animator at Disney back in the late 30s and 40s. He worked on films there like Pinocchio, Fantasia, Dumbo, and Bambi. But Melendez, in his post-Disney career, had gone on to do quite well for himself in television animation. And where he enters the picture in today's story, 68, 69... well, Bill has been working with Charles M. Schulz for 5 years now on his Emmy award-winning series of Peanuts TV specials, which have been racking up huge ratings over at CBS. And Melendez and Schulz, they want to expand Peanuts' reach beyond television. They want to try their hand at a full-length Peanuts movie for theatrical release, which they do. A Boy Named Charlie Brown, which is released at theaters in December of 1969. And A Boy Named Charlie Brown does okay at the box office, $12 billion in ticket sales in North America, which, given the film only cost $1.1 million to make, that's a nice return on the investment. But what Charles and Bill don't like is what critics consistently said about A Boy Named Charlie Brown, which was that this feature-length Peanuts cartoon looked a little too much like a Peanuts TV special. Which is why, as Schulz and Melendez began prepping a Peanuts follow-up feature film, they decided, let's try and make this one like those animated movies that Disney makes. You know, those things that have the songs by the Sherman Brothers. Which is why Dick and Bob find themselves post-Disney writing songs for the Peanuts characters to perform in Snoopy Come Home, which would be released to theaters in August of 1972. Mind you, the Sherman Brothers had only just begun working on songs for the second feature-length Peanuts movie, again for theatrical release, when they get the call from Bill Walsh in August of 69. Bill tells Bob and Dick, I finally convinced those idiots in the corner office to greenlight Bedknobs and Broomsticks, so come on back. We're actually going to make this movie. And, so back to Disney Studios the Sherman Brothers go. Albeit temporarily this time. Bedknobs and Broomsticks is in production on the Burbank lot from March of 1970 through June of that same year, 1970. And right after that, Dick and Bob are cut loose again. Which is great news for the folks over at Hanna-Barbera, because they just lucked into the film rights for Charlotte's Web, that beloved children's book that E.B. White had written back in 1952. Joe Barbera and William Hanna had always dreamed of doing a Disney-quality animated film for theatrical release, and what better way was there to guarantee that Charlotte's Web would be a Disney-quality production than by hiring the Sherman Brothers to write the score for this animated feature, which comes out, I want to say March of 73. This, for me, is the supreme irony of the early 1970s. Everyone else in Hollywood wants to work with the Sherman Brothers to make Disney-quality movies, except Disney. Now, mind you, Disney, at this point in time, they're flailing. They have begun to see younger filmmakers like George Lucas and Steven Spielberg step into the space that Walt previously occupied, and then begin creating movies like the original Star Wars or E.T. the Extraterrestrial, films that genuinely connect with the modern movie-going audience. Whereas Disney, in response to Episode 4, A New Hope, they made movies like Unidentified Flying Oddball or The Cat from Outer Space, and then watched in horror as each year went by. Disney's share of the movie-going public got smaller and smaller and smaller. Now, mind you, the Sherman Brothers are still out there and willing to work at Disney during this time. But the only division at the company that seems to still value Dick and Bob's creative contributions back then are the Imagineers, who then hired the Sherman Brothers to write songs for Epcot Center, chief among these being One Little Spark, Magic Journeys, and Making Memories for the Imagination Pavilion, again, sponsored by Kodak. This, to my way of thinking, it always seems a touch hypocritical to have the modern Walt Disney Company repeatedly make a fuss about anything involving the Sherman Brothers. I mean, case in point, last year when an additional verse to It's a Small World, was found among Dick Sherman's personal papers. And the company then made this big show of adding these new lyrics to the version of the Small World song that was presented inside of Disneyland's version of this attraction. Whereas we look back at the 70s and the 80s, Dick and Bob were ready, willing, and eager to come back to work for the Mouse House, only to have executives at the studio repeatedly say, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. I bring this up because I have always been especially fascinated by a story that Alan Menken once shared with me, how when he and Howard Ashman went into Disney Studios in 1987, or thereabouts, to pitch their score for The Little Mermaid, Alan and Howard were told at that meeting that earlier that morning, Dick and Bob Sherman had come into feature animation to pitch their score for The Little Mermaid. Now, mind you, I love the songs that Ashman and Menken wrote for the Little Mermaid, and those songs, in a lot of ways, made the second golden age of Disney feature animation possible. But at the same time, I really, really, really want to hear those sample songs that the Sherman Brothers put together for their pitch to do the score for Disney's The Little Mermaid. Now, mind you, to gain access to, that sort of material inside of the Disney vault, you would need Ethan Hunt level clearance. And speaking of the central character of all those Mission Impossible movies, if you'd like to learn more about how those 8 films were actually made, well, you really need to listen to Light the Fuse, the official Mission Impossible podcast. And that was done by Drew Taylor and his equally talented co-host, Charles Hood. There are nearly 300 episodes in the archive for that podcast, and every time I listen to Drew and Charles's podcast, I learn something new. And by the way, I'm hoping the same thing will happen to you if you listen to some of the podcasts we post here at Jim Hill Media, that you'll learn something new, learn some amazing stories. And by the way, those shows include Disney Dish with Len Testa, the Epic Universal podcast I do with Eric Hersey, the very talented gentleman who produces a lot of the podcasts here on Jim Hill Media. Likewise, I Want That Too. That's the Disney Merch podcast I do with Eric's lovely bride, Lauren. Also want to remind you about Manufacturing the Magic. That's the themed entertainment history podcast that we host here at Jim Hill Media. That's produced by Noah and Shelley Valladolid, and a brand new episode of that will be dropping here this coming Saturday. I also want to direct your attention to 2 new shows that have recently joined the network. The Case 4 with Chris Cox. A new one of those drops this Wednesday, tomorrow. And a reboot of Marvelous Disney, the show I'm now doing with Dan Graney. New episode of that will drop Wednesday after that. Over on Patreon, a brand new episode of Disney Unpacked just went live this past Sunday. That's the video series that Len and I do with veteran Imagineer Jim Schul, and the show that just posted takes you inside of all of Epcot's old corporate lounges. Anyway, Mr. Taylor said his goodbyes earlier in today's show, and as they get ready to say my goodbyes, again, want to thank Eric Hersey and David Gray for the great job they do editing and producing this podcast. Also want to ask a favor, you folks. Could you please head over to Apple Podcasts and rate and review this show as well as Light the Fuse? Also want to talk about social media as I head out the door. Drew can be found on X and Instagram and Blue Sky. Drew tailored like a tailored shirt. As for me, you can find me on X and Instagram as Jim Hill Media, and then over on Facebook as Jim Hill Media News. And hey, that's going to do it for this week's show. Again, as I mentioned earlier on in today's show, Drew will be back for next week's edition of Fine Tuning. But until then, on behalf of Mr. Taylor, thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of Fine Tuning, and we will be back soon.